I am proud of it. I'm really proud of what I made. And so difficult to set words on it.
What is Contour Legacy? Well, a few years ago we created the Heritage Special as kind of a unique celebration of our past. And if you look on the front of that Heritage Special speaker, it says Heritage Collection. And to have a collection, we need more than one speaker. I think one of the interesting things was the first time I heard it, it took me a little while to understand why this speaker is so special, because nothing really stood out to me as kind of unique. And then it occurred to me 1.5 hours later, then I forgot to actually listen to whether I liked the speaker or not. I just heard more and more music and kept finding things that I wanted to put on to hear how does that sound on this speaker. And that's really when I know that you hit the speaker right. Is that you stop listening to all the technical things and just listen to music.
TEMVDED tempted. I was tempted, tempted by your smile.
My name is Kim Eland. I'm a prototype technician at Dynaudio, and I'm also a sound technician at Dynaudio. What I do is I help develop new products to make them easy to reproduce in production, and of course make them work in a proper way so they sound good. And the sound technician part is I'm on a listening panel, 3 persons who decide whether a new product is good enough for the Dynaudio sound and for putting in the market.
So we decided to look at a Contour 1.8, which is kind of the middle of that line. It was a very successful product, and we decided to do a new version of that, basically. It's relatively simple to make something that measures flat and looks like it should be a good performing speaker, but making something that speaks to your emotional sense and makes you actually listen to music and enjoy music is a much bigger challenge, and there's still a lot more to it than just making things optimal. One of the challenges with this design is, of course, we are locking ourselves into a design which has its merit, but acoustically is superseded by some of our newer designs. So we're giving ourselves some limitations in terms of design. So how do we make that sound the best way possible? And that just takes a lot of fine tuning and tuning by ear.
The Contour Legacy came from the Heritage Special. We had a big hit with that one, a smaller version, you could say, but this is a completely different speaker. It's different drivers and different ideas. When that is said, we didn't go for size and monitor-like sound. We wanted a musical sound. So how can we keep on improving? There's only so much you can do in a speaker. And we try to make every single speaker sound the best it can. It's all in the detail.
My name is Martin, and I have built speaker from Dynaudio for 20 years right now. And I have a big passion for speakers, and exactly Dynaudio speakers. I still have the passion. If you ask me, I will make more cabinets. I cannot, I love it, really love it. I love the details on surface and the quality of the wood when we look on it,
It's basically a 2-year process from beginning the project until the product is actually in the stores. We started out with more or less the same mindset, the original Contour design, that line around the edge of the cabinet, which is actually what gave it the name Contour. That is the contour around the speaker. So of course they look very similar. There are some technical similarities as well. We actually looked at where can we make a better product using this whole concept as the basis. You can look at the speaker and say, okay, that looks fairly simple. It looks like all the components we already had on the shelves, but it's like we always do. Everything's optimized specifically for the speaker because we're never happy with just putting together the standard components. So we want everything to be perfect for this particular model. So we set out more freely, so to speak, than just making a bigger Heritage Special. We looked at, okay, this is a larger speaker. What can we do to really optimize that design to get the most out of that size cabinet?
We paid attention to all the small details we could control. And that's when our listening teams come into play, because the three of us in the listening teams are pretty good at remembering sounds. Our chief acoustic engineer can come back after a holiday and say, what did you change? And it's probably almost nothing. At one point it was the lagger, he could hear the difference. So he is really, really good at that. And me and the other one is pretty good at it as well.
It's so Danish design, if you look on this one. Maybe it's boring, maybe it's not, but it cannot be more Danish in a square box. But it's a beautiful box, and it's straight, and you can put it in all rooms. The wood the Contour Legacy is made of is American walnut, a special high quality of walnut for this cabinet. But again, it's also a high quality we made, so it's not a furniture. It's a speaker, Dynaudio speaker, so of course it needs to be high quality. The veneer is 0.7 or 0.9 millimeters. So there's not much veneer to sand in.
We used some different drivers, and we used some different components for the crossover compared to the Heritage Special. We got a more detailed and full mid-range because of the larger drivers. And what we achieved was, for us, of course, more bass.
So there's really one choice at this stage for a really good loudspeaker. That is the Azotar 3 tweeter, which is the same tweeter as we use in the Confidence, which is already also what we used in the Heritage Special. The Azotar 3 is the best tweeter we've ever made. In the Contour Legacy, it has a very large faceplate. That's because we wanted to do an homage of the original T330, which is where the legend of the Azotar really came from. We wanted something that looked like that, but of course has the improvements that we made in the Azotar 3. It's of course the 28mm soft dome that we are famous for. It has an oversized neodymium magnet, even larger than what we used before. It has a large rear chamber made from metal to reduce resonances in the rear chamber. The large rear chamber means that we have a very low resonance frequency of the tweeter, so it can run very low in frequency. The long excursion of our 28mm dome means that we can run a very wide frequency range with very high output without any sort of distortion. So it really blends well together with the woofer. So we can do a simple crossover due to just the sheer quality of the tweeter.
We spend a lot of time listening to different capacitors for the components on the crossover to make everything fit together and sound as we wanted it to. And we ended up using Duelund, a Danish company, for capacitors. And then they made everything open up compared to the capacitors we used to use, which are really, really good.
The woofer really started out looking at the original Evidence Platinum. So it's designed in a similar way as our old traditional woofers. What we did with the Contour Legacy was we optimized this woofer further specifically for this speaker. So there are some optimizations done in terms of the exact dimensions of voice coils and the whole construction of the driver, with a very large voice coil, 75mm voice coil. And inside the voice coil, we have the magnets. And the magnet system is quite unique in this one. You have a neodymium magnet to really deliver the power of the magnet system. And then we add a ferrite magnet to control the magnetic field to optimize it on the voice coil. So we have the optimal control of the voice coil in the magnet system. The crossover is a 2.5-way crossover, which basically means that you start out with a 2-way tweeter and woofer. So what you do in a 2.5-way, you add an extra woofer to add in that output. Then you make the crossover so that it aligns just at the frequency where you would normally have this fallout of bass. So that means that we can keep the full sensitivity of the tweeter and mid-range. So we get a much higher sensitivity in the speaker than we do with a Heritage Special speaker.
It goes like this.
So part of the original Contour design was a very sleek design, but very rigid construction with no outriggers or that this base plate that's part of the design but doesn't stick out. The cabinet itself is constructed very similar to the way we designed the original Contour range. The thing is that today we have very rigid standards on safety, so we have to make sure that the speaker doesn't tip over. So that's why most speakers today have these outriggers. We didn't really want to do that. We wanted to keep the original Contour design.
We ended up with a die-cast iron foot. The foot on this speaker is pretty heavy. It weighs 8.5 kilos. It really, really tightens the sound up image-wise, and also the bass performance got a lot better when we put the heavy foot on it. Other than that, it helps the speaker not to fall over, of course, which is very important if you like your kids and cats. So.
If you take a look at the back of the speaker, you'll find 2 bass ports. The very large bass ports, very nicely constructed, screwed into the cabinet, so you have a very solid mechanical connection to the ports.
We spent a lot of time tuning the length of the bass port. Actually, we listened to bass port that was only 2 millimeters different in length. Spent a lot of time doing that, and that changed a lot, especially in the mid-range. Surprisingly, it got more clear and detailed in the mid-range when we changed the port.
Well, the most important part is a very large diameter, which means we have a very high output, high throughput of air without port noise in the ports. And at the bottom we have the terminals, which is WBT next-gen terminals. So again, of course, like the rest of the speaker, very high quality components. And that feeling of sturdy quality, just the simpleness of that is just a really, really nice thing. So I think the star of the product is really the overall character and overall design.
The Heritage Special was really, really good, but this one is just better in all aspects, but especially the bass, of course.
So we decided to make this limited edition. We wanted it to be something special for the owner. We are proud of making the products. It would be nice if the owners are also proud of owning a pair.
I will say in the old days, my favorite speaker was Confidence C1. I think this is gonna be my favorite from now.